Hello everybody and welcome back to another Pokémon Emerald video. Today I will be playing through the game with another one of the original 151 Pokémons. The star of today's video is going to be Weezing. To be honest, I do not think I have never used Weezing all that much. Its stats are not very attractive and poison is one of my least favorite typings. Anyway, for the rules, I can only use my starter in combat. I can't use items from my bag in battle, I can't increase my evasion in any way, and I can't use cheats or glitches. While it's true that Weezing stats are not that great, they are also not that bad compared to many other Pokémons I have used. Also, the move pool is very wide, with some moves that you might not expect, like Flamethrower or Thunderbolt. The starting moveset is not very good, I only have Tackle to deal any decent damage. Smog is stab, but it's also very inaccurate. And Poison Gas has even less accuracy only for a simple poison. Anyway, my stats are good enough to get through the first few fights in the game until the grunt in the forest. His Poochyena took 3 tackles, which is not very good for a fully evolved Pokémon. But the real problems started with the first gym leader. For Roxanne, I had to rely on the damage over time of poison, which is not exactly a great strategy, especially because I do not have any way of healing myself. I did equip a Oran Berry, but that was not all that useful. I attempted her a few times at the lower levels, but then I realized I could not do it, and so I went and grinded a bit more. One option would have been to get to level 21. At that point, Weezing learns Sludge, which is still not the best option since the Geodudes resist it, but it's by far better than Smog and Tackle. Of course, since I am a masochist, I did not want to take the easy way out, and so I attempted her a few more times with the Poison Gas strategy. I'm not sure why, but the Poison Gas against her ace was almost never landing. It has 55 accuracy and so slightly more than a coin flip. But instead it missed even 7 times in a row against Nosepass. Anyway, in the successful attempt, not much changed. I got a bit better luck with the poison status effect, and it landed very easily. Also, I think that Nosepass AI broke a little bit, as it just spammed Harden and Tackles on me. It would have been able to defeat me if he used Rock Tomb, but instead I got the win in the end. At least, by having to get so many levels for Roxanne, I am somewhat ready for the next fights. The one against the grunt in the Whisper Cave was very easy, and with that we have rescued the Pico. Next, we have to take on the optional fight against our rival, and once again, this fight could have been harder at a lower level, but since I am now 21 and I know Sludge, the fight against her was quite a bit easier. Especially because her Mudkip is not ground type yet. Today, since I have somewhat the type advantage against Brawly, I decided to take him on early. The damage from Sludge is quite good, and I was able to one-shot his first 2 Pokémons. The same cannot be said for Makuhita, but fortunately it did not put up much of a fight either. With the first 2 gyms defeated, we can make our way to Slateport, where we have to deliver some engine parts, but also have to defend ourselves from a couple of Team Aqua grunts. Their Pokémons are quite frail, even though their Zubat resists my stab poison attacks. Also, I found out that the Sludge does not make contact, which makes sense, but you never know in Pokémon. Once we have listened to Archie for a little while, we can resume our journey, and after grinding a couple more levels, we can take on the not-so-optional fight against our rival. Most of her team at this point is not a problem, other than her starter. It now has the ground typing, and so he resists poison, but Sludge was still enough to 3-shot him. And with that, we got this victory too. Next up is Wattson, and the only problematic thing about his team is the Steel Magneton. And so, for him, I took advantage of the wide move pool and thought Weezing Flamethrower. My special attack is not that great, especially since the nature lowers it even further, but with a super effective attack I can still easily take care of that problematic Pokémon, and from there things went much smoother. Since I did not get terrible paralysis RNG, I was able to get through Wattson in the first attempt, and so the third badge is ours too. Thanks to it, we can use Rock Smash to explore the rest of the mainland of the region, and once we reach the Meterfall Caves, we are informed about Max's plan. To try to stop him, we climb the volcano and challenge him to a fight. The match against Maxi is a bit annoying, mostly because his Mightyena has Intimidate, and since poison attacks are physical in this generation, that will lower my damage significantly. Fortunately for the moment, his team is still quite underleveled and not really powerful, so even though it took a few attacks, I was able to get through all of his Pokémons without having to reset. Now that Max's plan is thwarted, we can get down from the volcano and take on the next gym. Flannery was not that kind to me, and she was able to two-shot me with Overheat. At least that only happened once, and in the second attempt I was able to get through her. Camerupt did not set up the sun this time around, because I got a full paralysis from Secret Power. Without it, the Torkoal decided to not go for Overheat strategies, but instead she tried to infatuate me with Attract. That was a bit effective, as I wasted a few turns, and things got even more dangerous once she set up the sun herself. Thankfully, her AI broke too, as she was only spamming Body Slam. Sure, she got the paralysis, which is very bad, combined with the infatuation, but eventually the poison status effect was able to carry me to victory, and so this gym is defeated too. Since we do not have to worry about Brawly this time around, I can go straight to my dad. Norman is a bit scary, but not that much. Weezing's best stat is physical defense, which will help me out against their normal attacks. Sludge at this point is sort of starting to fall off, and so it is unable to one-shot his Pokémons. Because of that, I got hit by a few attacks, but I still reached slacking with a good amount of HP. The fight against his ace Pokémon took quite a few turns because he is very tanky and he also likes to put me to sleep. Eventually we were able to take it down, and so the 5th badge is ours too. Thanks to that, we can use Surf out of combat, and after exploring a bit more, we stumble upon the Weather Institute. Here we have to defeat the Team Aqua leader Shelly, and even though her team is still a bit annoying, it's nothing to write home about. Moving on from that pit stop, we have another fight against a rival. May's team did not change much, she only got a bunch of extra levels compared to our previous encounter. The only thing that is a bit worrisome is Marshtomp, but since I can ignore his ground attacks thanks to my ability, the fight against it was quite easy in the end too. Once we have beaten our rival, we can do a bit of stuff with Steven, and then we are ready for the next gym. Winona should not be particularly problematic. Her Pokémons are very fast, and so they may be able to outspeed me, but they should not have all that much to hit me with. Altaria has Earthquake, but once again Levitate saves us. The rest of her team should fall to either Shockwave or Flamethrower, and so this is another gym defeated in the first attempt on our journey to the Victory Road. By getting this badge, we can also use the HM for Fly out of combat, which will be useful in a little bit, but first we have the last optional fight against our rival. Also, I should mention that I made a pretty significant misplay here, or should I say a while ago. I forgot to grab the Sludge Bomb TM. I thought that Weezing could learn it through level up, but that's muck. It took me quite a while to realize that, and even though it's not that significant, I am sure it would have made a few fights easier. Once we have picked up the magma emblem from the Pokémon Cemetery, we can get to the cave where Groudon resides. As we get to the legendary Pokémon, we see Maxie awaken him with the wrong orb, and so the legendary flees away. In frustration, Maxie fights us, and this fight was not that simple honestly. His Pokémons are much more tanky at this point, and so it took me quite a few turns to defeat each of them. Once again, Levitate is the unsung MVP of this run. That Camerupt knows Earthquake, and I'm sure it would deal a lot of damage to me. Spoiler alert, it will in the Mach run. Anyway, for today, Maxie is defeated too, and so we can journey to do the same to the Team Aqua base. Here we are only able to find another one of their admirals, and even though the fight against him is not particularly interesting, it was not that easy either. The special attacks are really not that powerful, and my physical ones are also quite weak because of Intimidate. Honestly though, I wish all of the fights were as easy as this one, because next we have Tate and Liza, and they turned out to be a major problem. I took a detour to grab Shadow Ball, because that's a very good move against them, but even with that super effective attack, the fight against them proved to be very difficult. My level is still somewhat low, and so I am unable to get the one-shot on all of their Pokémons with the Shadow Ball. And of course, their Pokémons can deal a lot of damage to me with their Psychic attack. It is Boot Stab and super effective. In the successful attempt, they fortunately wasted quite a few turns either trying to confuse me or setting up, and that gave me enough turns to defeat them, making the fight seem much easier than it was in reality. Now that we have defeated those two guys, we have to help Steven out in the other double fight of this island. This one also looks a bit scary, but it's really not that bad. Even though their Camerupts are part ground typing and they resist many of my attacks, their damage output is not that great. and so even though it took a lot of turns, eventually I am able to get through them. This time around, Steven decided to be a lot more damage oriented, going for an attack most of his turns. That is fine, but a reflect or a light screen is always helpful, since I do not have any way of healing myself. As usual, this fight is not particularly interesting, they just have quite a few Pokémons, so it takes a lot of time to get through all of them. I am still keeping Flamethrower in my moveset for one Pokémon in particular that will show up later, even though that move is by far not the best option at this point. It was also in this fight that I realized about the Sludge mistake, and so I got Sludge Bomb for the next match against Archie. That was actually quite helpful. Sludge Bomb is a decent move against his team other than the Crobat, and even if Intimidate lowers my attack, I am still able to deal some decent damage. In this fight I got confused as usual, but this time around I snapped out of it after just hitting myself once. Of course, that was not good enough for Archie, and so he confused me again. The second time the confusion lasted a bit longer, but it was still not that impactful. Once we defeated him, the Kyogre is awoken too, and so now that both of the legendaries are awake, the weather became a mess because of their abilities. To try to stop them and prevent the end of the world, we go ask Rayquaza for help. The green snake is soon coming down from the sky to shout at the other two legendaries and break up their fighting. Once we have saved the planet, we can finally take on the last of the gyms in the region. Juan uses water types, which are not that problematic for us. The matchup is neutral on either side, and so this is just a stat check. Unfortunately, I do not have quite enough damage to one-shot all of his Pokémons, and this is especially true for Kingdra. Fortunately, I am faster and I can ignore the double team, so this time around I dodged the bullet. After sweeping through the rest of his team, we can claim the last of the badges, and thanks to that, we can use all of the HMs. And so, after just a couple of minutes, we enter the victory road. Here we are immediately stopped by Wally, who wants to fight us. His team is quite heterogeneous, with a lot of different typings, both defensive and offensive. Fortunately for me, the only Pokémon who can pose a threat is not the Gardevoir, but the Magneton, and of course I kept Flamethrower just for it. Once the Magnet Pokémon is defeated, I can quickly take care of the rest of the team, and so we are done with him too. After getting through the cave, we can enter the league, where after a couple preparations, I can take on the first of the Elite Four. Sidney is a bit annoying as usual, mostly because of the Intimidate from his lead Mightyena. Because of that ability, my damage is not very good, and so I cannot one-shot his Pokémons. At least the ones not weak to poison. Also, this time around, Mightyena went for a few crunches, breaking my substitute very easily. That is not great, but also not the end of the world. I took the opportunity to set up another one to protect myself from any annoying attacks, and after that I took my time throwing some sludge bombs out and eventually defeating all of his Pokémons. The second fight in the Elite Four is going to be against Phoebe. For her, I have to immediately use a substitute to protect myself from the curse. After that, I can spam Shadow Balls to my heart's content, and I even don't have to worry about PPs since I equipped a Leppa Berry. That was sort of needed, since the only other move I can hit her with is Sludge Bomb, but all of her Pokémons resist it, and so it's not exactly a great option. The fight against her took a bit longer than I expected, with a few of her Pokémons surviving my attacks at the end. After defeating her too, we can make our way to the third Elite Four member. From here I got rid of Shadow Ball since it is not going to be all that effective, and instead I teach the Thunderbolt. Once again, with my low special attack, the damage is not going to be all that impressive, but since many Pokémons from here on out are weak to electric, I thought it might be worth it. Anyway, Glacia is not going too well. She was able to use a hail, and so I got quite a lot of chip damage from that weather effect. And also, her Pokémons are very tanky, and so I am unable to one-shot them with either Thunderbolt or Sludge Bomb. That allowed her to set up another hail, which is quite bad for me, because that means even more chip damage. Especially if she keeps stalling me with full restores. Things were not looking too good once I reached her wall rain, but I was just barely able to survive her attack and finish her off in the crackback. After an extremely close fight against Glacia, things did not go as well for Drake. Here I lost once because his Pokémons are quite powerful, but somehow in the second attempt things went much better. Sludge Bomb is a decent option in this fight. Not many of his Pokémons are able to resist it, only Flygon can. But even if that's the case, it is still not enough to one-shot them. That is less than ideal, especially because his Pokémons like to set up before hitting me with a very powerful attack. I was expecting to lose my substitute multiple times throughout this fight, but in this attempt I was somehow able to keep it all the way to Flygon. Here it eventually faded, but I am still able to set up another one and proceed from here. By hiding behind it, I can block Salamen's Intimidate, and thanks to that, a couple of Sludge Bombs are just barely enough to take out his Ace Dragon and get me through this fight too. Last but definitely not least is the champion Wallace. I was a bit worried about this fight. I do not have any way to improve my stats, and my level is not that high, all things considered. I did lose once, but I expected this fight to be much worse. Much like with Drake, I was expecting his Pokémons to be quite aggressive and break my substitute multiple times. My poison typing also leads to a couple interesting interactions in this fight. Both his Tentacruel and Milotic love to use Toxic on you, but since I am immune to that status effect, they were much more aggressive this time around. That is actually not great for me, as I would have loved to have a couple of free turns as they used status moves on the substitute. No matter, I was still able to get through most of his Pokémons, with my sub finally fading against Milotic. And with one last Sludge Bomb, I can take down his ace Pokémon too, and that's how Weezing became the champion of the Hoenn region. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, ring the bell, and all of that YouTube stuff. If you have any video ideas, comments, feedback, or anything like that, leave it down below, and I'll see you next week. Bye!